which are in stock at the moment. We've just finally had the last batch of them, and I think it's taken us about 12 months longer than we expected. So I thought I'd explain a few of the reasons, so that the next time any of you are thinking, hey, let's make stuff in Britain because it'll be great, you'll know why we don't always do that. So a few years ago we got hold of some stretch silk through a clearance merchant. Stretch silk in this country is usually about £25 a metre, and this was about half that. And I really love silk, but usually we can't afford it, it doesn't fit within Kiss Me Deadbeat's price range. So we went, have that, and since then we've been slowly making it into garments. And I wanted to keep the most of it for doing sleepwear, because I think silk sleepwear is really nice, and also it's a really lovely thing to wear next to your skin under an outfit. We've been trying to get these made for a while, and this time last year I was talking to the British factory, and they basically had reduced their capacity. They'd laid off a couple of workers, and I said to them, do you actually have enough room to do all of this, particularly because they usually use power net and do girdles and things, and so to get them to do this means that they have to switch all their machines around and get their people to work on stuff they're not used to working on. And so she said no, she would prefer it if we made them somewhere else. They were already running late, so I was a bit like, where are we going to make them? And at the same time I'd been approached by another brand who said that as well as doing their own brand, they were also starting to make for other people in the hope that they could demonstrate to companies like ASOS that they had enough manufacturing skill and capacity to start bringing some of their work back to Britain. So it seemed like a good idea to go with them. We sent everything off and we paid a deposit, because usually if you're starting with somebody new you're going to have to pay at least 30 to 50% of the money up front. So we sent them a deposit of, I don't know, about £1,500 or something in that region, and we also sent them all of our silk, which was worth about £2,000 at cost, and more if we'd have had to replace it. And we sent them various laces and the other components. It may interest you to know that as a small company, as well as hoovering up the silk from much bigger brands, we also hoovered up the metal rings and sliders from Dirty Pretty Things when they were closing. So we sent it all off to them, and they sent some samples back. Now, I'm not technically trained, I never did a lingerie degree, I've never worked in the factories, but I kept looking at these samples and thinking there's something wrong with this sample and I don't quite know what. And eventually I started to work out that all the samples were asymmetrical. They didn't make any sense every time I folded them in half. They didn't match. And so I sent them off to our technical person, Lizzie Beswick in the UK, to have a look at them, and she was like, yeah, these are not okay. There's a number of problems. So we went back and forth on this for about 2 months, because by this point it was November. It was the busiest time of the year for us, and we were going back and forth on what was wrong with these samples and what needed to change. Lesson: if you're going to make something with a factory, never pay the deposit or send everything over until you've had a satisfactory sample. But I genuinely believed at the time, these are not our most complicated design, I genuinely believed it should be okay. Then we hit Christmas, and also the boss of that factory was pregnant and gave birth by caesarean section just before Christmas. She told me over Christmas that she'd gone back to work after 5 days, which seemed quite fast for caesarean section. I was surprised to hear from her, but we started sorting things out, and then she emailed me in January to say that actually she was going to have to close down. Now the problem at that point became that not only was she going to close down, but she was going into liquidation. That's a process in the UK whereby people would come in and they would close it down for her. She wasn't going to wrap it up herself. And so anybody whose goods were left in the factory at that point was going to find that they wouldn't be able to get them out again without a lengthy legal process, because anybody who's ever been involved in the liquidation process will know everything just kind of gets clamped down until the authorities can work out what's what. So we were quite keen to get our goods out of there, because by that point we still hadn't had a satisfactory sample, and I think we'd been through 4 or 5 attempts. And it was pretty clear that it was different staff members each time, which is a bit worrying because you shouldn't really get through staff members at that rate. I was a bit fraught because I couldn't see how we were going to manage this. She was telling me she'd allocated 2 days to make 170 slips, which didn't really seem very plausible, particularly not as we discovered later, they were actually part-time workers, so there's really not very many staffing hours to run a whole load of slip sewing machines. In the end, I sent somebody up to help her, but I also spoke to my family because this factory was in Lancashire. My family are from Lancashire, which is the north of England for anybody who's not British and has no idea what I'm talking about. And I spoke to my brother and asked him to go and collect everything once it was done. I didn't think they'd get all the way through them, and I said I just need to get whatever work has been done and all of our silk, because that's the really expensive bit, out of the factory before it's closed and the liquidators come in. And my brother agreed to do that, but then he said that he would need some help, so my dad volunteered to go with him as well. And then my mum heard us talking on the phone, and all I could hear in the background was my mum going, "What, you're all going out? Well, I'm not staying at home on my own." So basically my family went on a happy day out to collect silk slips from a factory. And as we thought, they were not fully made, they hadn't been completed, and in some cases they hadn't been cut properly. They'd done a fairly shoddy job of it, so there were very few that were made, which meant that we then had to take everything and yet again place it with a new set of people. And so in the end, the person that ended up making your beautiful silk slips, individually, one at a time, by hand, is a woman called Milda, who is lovely and has made samples and things for us before, and every now and then does tiny production runs, and she works from home and has to fit it in between childcare. And that's the story of how your silk slip got to you, and why making things in Britain isn't always as simple as you think it should be.